Hello again, I'm Robert Fithin. It has been quite a ride so far, has it not? As we do the deep dive into 1983 albums going chronologically, we are in the end of August of 1983 and some interesting albums here to discuss. The early 1980s were absolutely insanely huge for AC/DC. The decade starts off, they still got the popularity of Highway to Hell from the previous year. That's absolutely huge. You've got AC/DC in the news because of unfortunate death of Bon Scott, and then Back in Black comes out. That I don't have to tell you how much that blew up, and that was insanely popular. That the legacy of that just went on and on and on. And then they've got Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap, the U.S. release of that. It was like, if you were in America, that was like a brand new album. So that comes out, and then For Those About to Rock after that, and so it was like bam, 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 just one after the other. Huge AC/DC. Early 80s in the United States was absolutely insanely huge for AC/DC. So here we are in August the 19th, 1983. We're ready for some new AC/DC, and they bring us Flick of the Switch. That was the new AC/DC album for 1983. And this is the one where, to me, it sounds like they have found the cruise control button. This is the one where this is the beginning of where it's like, okay, we're just going to make every album sound very similar. We know what the audience wants. We are going to give them that. We are not going to deviate. Everything mid-tempo, this very easy drum pattern, this very basic rock riffs, the same pretty much mix on a lot of things, although later on, like Fly on the Wall, or when they add all this echo or whatever. Pretty much it's the same mentality, I guess, behind the songs. They don't try to venture off and try different things or what. It's right down the line. We know what the audience wants. We're going to give them the same recipe every time, and it pretty much is solidified by the time this album comes out. And this is, like I said, this is the beginning of where you know that if you buy an AC/DC album at this point, you know exactly what you're going to get. So yeah, it's okay. It's not my favorite. It's not my go-to. It's not one of my go-to. I mean, I'm going to go, if I'm grabbing an AC/DC album to listen to, it's going to probably be a Bon Scott one. But as far as the Brian Johnson era, this still, it's better than some of them. It's not as good as some of them. It's just kind of in the middle. Starts off with one of my least favorite on here, Rising Power, and it pretty much does set the tone, though. Like I said, mid-level tempo, drums just go doom, 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 and just this really basic guitar sound and Brian Johnson screaming. That's what you have. House is on Fire, similar, Flick of the Switch, some of them are a little faster than others. Some of them have a little more of a interesting guitar thing going on. Landslide, I think, is one of my favorites on here. That no one ever mentions that song. That's got a good guitar riff to start that off. So does Badlands. Badlands is another one. That one starts off with this kind of guitar, the swaggery kind of nice guitar sound, but the lyrics come on as like, I'm a pistol packing man with my gun in my hand, So you have the double entendre, Down in the Hole. I'm sure we all know what hole he's down in. So you got that, but it's not as fun as the Bon Scott stuff. It's not as like, kind of dirty old man, kind of, it's not fun. It's just this kind of, it's that kind of thing. Again, not my favorite at all. Nervous Shakedown is okay, I guess. Guns for Hire, the guns is dick, I guess. Brain Shake is a nice ending. It's a little more intense. Got a little more going for you. You kind of want to crank that one up. So there's some okay ones on here, but mostly this is just generic. What becomes generic AC/DC starts with this album is basically what I'm trying to say. I was in rock radio. I was in active rock was the format for about 9 years. And active rock is a little harder than just mainstream rock, and it leaves off like the Eagles and Fleetwood Mac and stuff like that and concentrates more on bands like Van Halen and, AC/DC. So played all kinds of AC/DC. I mean, everything off Back in Black with the exception of maybe like one song. Played like three songs off of For Those About to Rock, played like 5 songs off Highway to Hell all the time in heavy rotation, as most of the active rock stations in the country did. I was in, like I said, 9 years, never played one song off of this. So these songs are not essential. They've pretty much been forgotten about except for like hardcore, AC/DC people that'll tell you every single album is a 5-star album. for most people, I think if you said AC/DC, they would not recognize any of these titles. This was constructed at a time when the band was kind of going through some turmoil, some interpersonal kind of stuff, especially with the drummer Phil Rudd. He's fired like halfway through, and you know, the band produced this themselves. They're not working with Mutt Lange. I think that's one of the things that made the Back in Black, Highway to Hell, For Those About to Rock, so, you know, so interesting of a combination, because you had this scraggly hard rock band that had no polish at all, you know, and then you have Mutt Lange, who wants everything perfect and everything polished. So you had those two, you know, you had those two things like this kind of friction that kind of worked. And that's what makes those albums so special. And then, of course, the Bon Scott albums before Highway to Hell, they're all great because of Bon Scott, you know, and because they're a young, hungry band that just is rocking out, plugging in and rocking out and just cranking it up. But they're not at a point now where they can crank it up, plug it in and not care and just hit record. They're not that band anymore. Although I do have this not only on vinyl, but I also have it on CD, just in case I ever want to listen to it on CD. I have that as well. So not a bad album, but not a great album. I would, you know, give it 3 stars because I know that AC/DC is capable of so much more. But this is, like I said, to me, this is the album where it starts getting to be like, this is AC/DC. You know exactly what you're going to get. If you just want more of that, then buy the new AC/DC album. Some of it will have a little more reverb or echo or whatever on it. Some of it won't. Some of it, like, you know, when you get later on, the albums get longer because they're made for CD. That's about the only difference. So, you know, I guess when you got a formula and it's selling, you don't tinker with it. That's the AC/DC way. It's August 22nd, 1983, and Depeche Mode just released their 3rd album called Construction Time Again. And this is another one of those 1983 albums that kind of stands a little bit of a head and shoulder above a lot of the so-called synth pop that was out at the time. Of course, Depeche Mode are doing more than just playing keyboards and, you know, the do-do-do-do drums. They're actually taking sounds of, you know, everyday life or machinery or toys or whatever, sampling them and then making that part of the music, or at least part of the percussion. So that's always been kind of their trademark early on, and this album certainly has that in throughout. It starts off with the song Lovin' Itself, not my favorite. I know this is one of the 2 singles on here, but I never cared for Lovin' Itself. Meh, so we skipped to track 2. Track 2 is where the fun really starts, a bit more of a upbeat kind of sound with the morose lyrics. That's another one of Depeche Mode's trademarks, and I love when that kind of contradictory thing works out, and it definitely works out in quite a few of these songs. This one is called More Than a Party, one of my favorite lines on this. You know, you tell us all we're about to have fun, then you take away all the ice cream until there's none. I don't like people that are going to be taking away the ice cream, man. I'm right there with you, Depeche Mode. That's a dick move, taking away all the ice cream after telling people they're going to have fun. You got Shame a little bit later on. Love the lyrics in that as well, about the, you know, I think that was inspired by a trip to Thailand or something where Martin Gore saw the poverty there and had to write a couple of tunes about that. So this one is all about, you know, the kids are poor and they're, you know, they're looking dirty and everything. Well, it's okay. The rain will wash away the dirt, but it will not wash away your shame. Shame on you. Depeche Mode Construction Time Again is definitely one of their finer achievements. This is still pretty early on for these guys, so they're still kind of feeling their way around and being a little bit experimental, which is always interesting with these guys. And yeah, some great little lines, lyrics popping up every now and then. The song And Now, final track on here, if you don't count the reprise of Everything Counts, has another great line in there, all about, you know, I prefer to think that things can't get much worse. And then, of course, they get much worse. And if you're going from a 1983 lens, yeah, they're going to get much, much, much worse. They're going to get a little better, and then they're going to get worse. And that's the pendulum that keeps swinging back and forth. But I love how this song, what I assume is calling out some sort of toxic optimism, which I've never been a fan of optimism. I think that's it rarely works out for the best. And I was kind of ahead of the curve on that. I know I'm behind the times on a lot of things. I'm the old man still listening to 1983 music, but I like to think I'm ahead of the curve on some things. And toxic optimism was one of them. I was talking about optimism being not necessarily a great thing to have all the time. You know, always the, well, look on the bright side, blah, 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 think good thoughts, blah, blah, and how actually that can turn out really bad if you're always doing that. And people would sometimes look at me like, I don't know what you're talking about. What, are you trying to be funny? Of course you want to be optimistic. Of course you want to always look on the bright side. Of course you always want to think that life is just a bunch of sunshine and buttercup. No, you don't. You want to be realistic so you can be prepared, or at least try to change things that are negative that are going to be coming your way. But I digress. This album also contains the big song Everything Counts, which with its great melody in there, and again, something that's just going to get worse as time goes on with the grabbing hands. Just grabbing all they can. That's not going to go away. Depeche Mode, Construction Time. Again, I will give this 4 stars. One of the better Depeche Mode albums. I'm not a huge Depeche Mode fan at all. I like some of their stuff. I was introduced to them pretty much later in their career, and had to do a lot of backtracking. Actually, I think when I come to think of it, the first song I ever heard from them was People Are People on the next album. They used to get played on the radio all the time, and then they kind of went away on US radio for a long time and didn't come back until like 1989. So yeah, this doesn't really bring back a lot of memories because I didn't really hear this album until a lot later, but it does have the song Told You So, where he keeps repeating, and then they go, told you so. They always go, told you so. And I had forgotten that that's the way we all used to talk in the 80s. Instead of saying somebody said something, we always would say they go, you know. Then they went, hi, how you doing, with his face? And then she goes, well, I'm doing okay considering. And then I go, well, you should be happy with, you know, everything was go instead of said or say. I had forgotten all about that, but that was the general way that people talked in the 80s. So yeah, thanks for that memory, Depeche Mode. Now, I know I said I'm not doing any country albums in this chronological overview of the albums of 1983, but what about an album with some guys in cowboy hats on the cover? That is the Gap Band, their 5th album there. That's Gap Band 5, and it's called Jammin'. This came out on August the 22nd. And yeah, we got some cowboy hat action going on there. Yeehaw! But on the back, you can see he's just flung the cowboy hat off. I think the inner sleeve, though, they're back. Yeah, they got the cowboy hat going on here in a black and white photo with a big yellow tie. But anyway, the Gap Band, mostly known for You Dropped the Bomb on Me. That was their big song. It's already been out at this point. It is not on this album. This album, though, it's the same thing I keep saying about these funky R&B albums from 1983. It's not 1973. It's not 1974. So the real cool funk that I really love has kind of been replaced by sort of generic stuff. And there's no real, it seems like, standout R&B. I mean, there's a couple. This is not one of them. Standout R&B albums from 83. This is it's good. You know, they're called the Gap Band, which is kind of ironic because they're super tight. Super tight musicianship going on here. Great production on here. It's just really a lack of songs that you can really sink your teeth into. A lot of it sounds like your basic kind of funky kind of R&B going on here for 1983. Now, they don't get carried away with the electro funk. This is not Cameo and bands like that where it's been, you know, the horns and the bass and everything and the drums have been overtaken by synths. They still got their real instruments going on. There's a little tiny bit of that creeping in, but not too much. So this is a steady album all the way through. Starts off with a track called "Where Are We Going?" though. That's like a minute-long instrumental thing with some audience behind it. I don't know if it was live or the audience is just kind of dubbed in or whatever. But it seems really unnecessary. It's like "Where Are We Going?" and the song literally goes nowhere, just for like a minute, and then the real album starts with Shake a Leg, which, you know, decent way to start I think that song could have just started the album. You got the fire there. You got some nice funk going on there. Again, funk in the 1983 definition of what that is. The single on here was Party Train. That's what kicks off side 2. So if you don't know too much about the Gap Band, you just know You Dropped the Bomb on Me and maybe a couple other songs. One of those couple other songs is probably Party Train with the little sounding like a toy train whistle on there. But yeah, so the Gap Band 5 jamming, they get it done. They go to work. They, it's serviceable, but it's not anything outstanding. It's not anything like, whoa, man, this blows my mind. You got to make this part of your collection. But if you find this in the $1 to $3 bin, maybe pick this up, and you probably will be satisfied having paid that price for it. But like I said, nothing mind-blowing on here. Your typical kind of R&B 1983 album. I'm going to give it 3 stars because it's better than average. It's not like a 2-star album, but it's not up to the level of like 4. So right in there with a 3-star album from the Gap Band. Jammin'. So the band Heart had their 2 main popular eras. They had their 70s stuff, Incredible, you know, Magic Man, Crazy on You, Baby Lestrange, Straight On, Kick It Out, you know, all those great Heart tracks, Barracuda. And then they have their mid-80s, kind of late 80s period where they go a little more full-on polished sound, going for the light rock crowd. You know, they got What About Love and These Dreams and Alone and all of those. 2 big eras for Heart, but they're, you know, kind of completely different. They're completely different sounds. And so, bridging those 2 eras, you have 2 albums that really didn't do very much. One is Private Audition, which came out in '82, and then you have the one from this year, released August 26th of 1983. It's called Passion Works. And I wasn't super familiar with this. I'd heard it a couple of times. It is somewhat kind of forgettable. I mean, it doesn't linger, you know, it's not like you walk away from this and you're humming the songs or whatever. So checked it out again for this video series and got the same impression. You know, I was somewhat familiar with this. It is the kind of thing that, you know, it's missing that special ingredient. It's missing the big hooks, the big hits, the big, you know, and then from the 70s stuff, it's missing like the, you know, the little magic things that are in Heart albums, like the little acoustic passages or the little interludes or the different types of, you know, approaches they're having. They get folky and you know, Renaissance Festival in one song, and then they just go on full-on hard rock with a great guitar riff. You know, that's the thing, too. Some of the members have changed at this point as well, so you don't have a lot of those players on this album. Of course, you have the Wilson sisters, and anytime you have Ann and Nancy Wilson, it's going to be at least decent. It's going to be not something you're going to shut off in disgust. So, you know, they're here, and that's great. But as far as memorable songs, as far as interesting production, as far as something that really grabs you, it is not on this album. And that's why this album and the one before it kind of get forgotten about between those 2 eras of huge Heart songs that everybody knows and loves, and they play in concert all the time. The single off of this was called How Can I Refuse? It's the first track. It's pretty decent. You putting this on to hear that first song, it's like, oh wow, cool. A hidden Heart album that, you know, kind of flew under the radar. What else cool going to be on here? And then you get blue guitar after that. That's pretty cool too. It's like, all right, not too bad. All right. You know, not exactly Magic Man or Barracuda, but, you know, this'll do. And then, you know, you get into Johnny Moon. The tempo kind of slows a little bit. It's not the best song. And then it starts diminishing a little bit. And by side 2, first track on there is called Allies. And that's the only song on here that Ann and Nancy Wilson didn't have anything to do with writing. This is a Jonathan Cain song, you know, from Journey. And it's terrible. It's the worst song on the album. It's this piano thing, so it does sound different. So at least it has that, you know, it gives the album some variety. But it's this wannabe epic kind of thing that sounds like it's from some forgotten B movie where the hero does something at the end. And it's got those 80s drums. You know, the song, you know, slows and kind of breaks down, and then you get this and then it picks back up, you know. It's not great, and the lyrics are not memorable, and it just comes off as completely overblown. Like I said, worst thing on the album. Everything else is at least doable, you know what I mean? And then that song, and for some reason, it's chosen as the second single. So that's probably another reason why this album really didn't do much, is because you have How Can I Refuse, which I don't remember ever hearing that on the radio or seeing a video for that anywhere. So I don't think it got a lot of promotion. But you have that, and then you have Allies as the 2 things that would have supposedly captivated you to go out and get this album beyond just it being a new Heart album. So not great. Last song on here called Ambush. The arrangement, as far as, you know, the lyrics and everything aren't great, but it does have this kind of more of an 80s feel with the synths in that song. They're kind of deeper, kind of got that pulsating 80s thing going on, and it's pretty cool. Not, you know, awesome or anything, but it's definitely better than Allies. Then again, every track on here is better than Allies. But so yeah, I will give this 3 stars because it is Heart, it is Ann and Nancy Wilson, but we're just waiting for the second big era with the Capitol Records. They signed to Capitol and then they come out with the self-titled album, and it's it blows them up big again. They're all over MTV, they're all over the radio again with 3 big singles off of that, maybe 4, and then Bad Animals after that keeps the momentum going. But yeah, Passion Works is kind of forgotten about, and if you don't have a lot of heart, or heart albums, not you have no heart, like the dude from Wizard of Oz or something. If you don't have a lot of heart albums, this is not one to go run out and grab and make it your second or third heart album ever. But if you love Ann and Nancy and you've worn out all your other albums, maybe check this one out if you've forgotten about it or if you've never heard it before. That's what I would say about Passion Work. It's interesting that this came out a couple of years, this one and the one before it, Private Audition, came out after the Greatest Hits album. And so they came out with that Greatest Hits and then just kind of start putting out stuff that has no hits on it. So that's kind of ironic. But anyway, yeah, Passion Works from Heart, 3 stars. Depending on who you believe, the Moody Blues released their 1983 album, The Present, on either August the 26th or September 2nd. Probably, maybe it was released in one territory in one date and another in the next. I don't know which is which. But we're doing August 26th since that comes first. Okay, the Moody Blues, The Present. This follows up Long Distance Voyager, and at least this album is a little bit more consistently pleasurable than that one. I mean, the Long Distance Voyager from 1981, you can pretty much turn off after the first 2 songs, the voice and talking out of turn, and then you can just be like, okay, well, I don't need to hear any more of this. Those were the only decent songs on the whole album. But yeah, The Present's got a little bit more going for it. It's got the big single, it wasn't a big single, it was a big single for me. I really liked it when it was out at the time, called Sitting at the Wheel. Very energetic, especially for the Moody Blues. It reminds me of the energy of something like Ride My Seesaw or something like that. The voice, I guess, was pretty mid-tempo head energy, but this one just blasts. It doesn't really sound like the Moody Blues as much as it sounds sort of more like Electric Light Orchestra. I mean, it doesn't sound exactly like them, but it's more in that area than in the Moody Blues, but it's a great upbeat, energetic 1980s song, basically, called Sitting at the Wheel. But this is definitely not 1970s Moody Blues, is basically what I'm saying. This is still got the keyboards, but they're much more in an 80s sort of sound. And this one starts off pretty strong with Blue World. That's the first track on here. Upbeat, it's got a great sound to it. Lively, vocals are great. You're listening to the Moody Blues, but you're listening to the Moody Blues that have gone into what at that time was The Present. And then after that, it's Meet Me Halfway. Same kind of style. We're going good here. And then, of course, you get the Sitting at the Wheel single. After that, it tends to drop off a bit. So instead of just having the 2 nice songs at the beginning of Long Distance Voyager, this one has 3. So better album. Has some interludes on there, like the sort of marching synth instrumental called Hole in the World. With the whole cadence snare drums and whatever. So you have that. You have sort of a country kind of song. Well, country for the Moody Blues, called It's Cold Outside, starting with this sort of country guitar, but it's either backwards or it's got a reverse sort of flange on it. One of the two. I think it's actually a backwards guitar, but it sounds a little country for them. Obviously, it's not like Conway Twitty or something like that, but it is a little more country for the Moody Blues. And then it starts to go right into ballad type of, adult contemporary type stuff with the final track called Sorry, that sort of starts off slow and builds, but it doesn't really build too much. It kind of starts here and builds up to here. But yeah, sorry is a word that means regret. Or, yeah, we knew that, man. But anyway, the Moody Blues, The Present, decent album. Better, I think, than Long Distance Voyager. Obviously, this is not on the threshold of a dream or something like that. But I will give this a solid 3 stars. If you're, not into the Moody Blues, don't know that much about them, you might enjoy it a little bit more if your expectations aren't as high because it's the Moody Blues. But yeah, Moody Blues, The Present, 3 stars from me. If you're in the United States and you hear the band name Level 42, you most likely think of the song Something About You, and that's probably it. That was their only top 10 hit here. They're pretty much a kind of a 2-hit wonder. They also had another one called Lessons in Love that was like a top 15 hit. But other than that, that's pretty much level 42 as far as the U.S. is concerned. They're pretty much this kind of 80s one-hit wonder, two-hit wonder type of thing. But I believe they're much more popular in the UK. They have quite a few albums, quite a few singles. And in August of 1983, on the 26th, as a matter of fact, they released the album called Standing in the Light. I had never heard this album before, never heard any songs from this album, but I always sort of liked the song Something About You, so, you know, definitely going to check out more Level 42. And it's a little more funky than I thought it would be on the first track. The very first song is called Micro Kid. And like I said, a little more funky than I thought it would be, but then I'm realizing, well, that can kind of be expected by a band that's led by the bassist. His name is Mark King, and he's pretty much the mind behind Level 42. He's the guy in the video, Something About You, that's on the train that just bursts out singing, you know, and yeah, with the really short hair. But yeah, so funkier than I thought. You know, it's like, well, this is okay for some light, passable, funky kind of, you know, kind of 80s stuff. It's okay. And that's about as good as this album gets. The rest, it just, as it plays on, I'm starting to, either the songs do this, or I'm starting to realize, one of the two, that this is becoming more like a jazzy, sort of smooth, jazzy, light funk kind of thing, which is not my kind of thing at all. I'm not even going to mention names of other tracks. They all just kind of blend together. There's the one about the pharaohs, something that is just super like, you know, that, no. Yeah, I was hoping for a little more from Level 42. Something more bouncy, something more poppy, more like Something About You. But this does not have that song or anything. I mean, some of the bass line stuff you can kind of hear, okay, yeah, that's the Level 42 thing that I'm familiar with. But mostly this is just, like I said, like a smoothed out, kind of sterile sounding. That's really a good word, sterile. Just not a lot of grit, not a lot of real deep funk kind of stuff going on, certainly. Absolutely. And nothing really interesting. I mean, the talented musicians, certainly some polyrhythms going on that are kind of like, okay, I can hear, you know, it's a little more intricate, but not really engaging. For me, anyway. It's not my thing. That's the whole thing. The smooth jazz, light funk, we're not going to try to, like, get in your groove a lot. We're just going to be over here. Don't mind us kind of like funky stuff. I'm not into that, and that's what this is. So I'm going to give this 2 stars and not revisit this. Maybe if I continue in the 80s on other deep dives, I'll listen to a different Level 42 album. If I ever get to the year, what is that, 85, when Something About You is out, whatever album that is, World Machine or World something, I'll listen to that, but I'm not going to listen to this again. I've heard it 3 times. I don't know why I even heard it the 3rd time. It's like, it's not going to change. I'm not going to change. That's not going to change. So, yeah, 2 stars. I am continuing my belated discovery of the band XTC by checking out their album called Mummer that was released on August 30th, 1983. Well, at least that's when it was released in the UK. It was much delayed in the US, being released months and months later. Usually I am, for this video series, sticking to US release dates, but this one is so far separated, I am just going from when it was originally presented to the world, August 30th, 1983. So yeah, like I said, continuing to discover XTC, and I'd never heard any songs off this album before, and it starts off pretty cool. Beating of the Hearts is the very first track, and instantly you are just whisked away to this wonderland of Andy Partridge and company, and you pretty much stay there for the whole album. It definitely has this kind of feel. I mean, the music is varied, but you're definitely in a place. You know, you're taken to a place and you're kept there nice and warm and safe. As safe as you can be with Andy Partridge's vocals, which have this sort of measured franticness to them. It's a really interesting way of presenting vocals. And yeah, it totally works. First song is great, snaps right out, upbeat kind of thing, but not like poppy upbeat, but more of just like a bouncy kind of thing that definitely keeps you in this realm of like what's going to happen here. And what does happen next is the song Wonderland, and featuring all of these wonderful little birds flying around and all of these little effects and whatever. And like I said, you're definitely taken away to this magical Hallmark land of, you know, dancing frogs or you know, whatever's going on, to this nice little you know, pond area with these magical things happening, and a song called Wonderland, as it should be with a song called Wonderland. Love on a Farm Boy's Wages is where you take a dip. This one I'm not as fond of. I don't really like this song. The lyrics are fine. You know, it's about this, well, farm guy working on a farm and making a shilling for every little job, and you know, well, not little job, for every massive job. You know, he herds the sheep, he gets a shilling, he does this thing over, he gets 1 shilling. So getting paid very little, and it's hard to you know, support the wife on wages like that. But that's just how it goes. Fine. But the singing style and the vocal arrangement is more of this kind of jazzy thing that's up here and then down here and blah 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 blah. I'm not into that. Great Fire is after that. Meh. You know, the whole thing about a fire tearing through the house and burning your house and scaring the animals, and I don't know if they're burning the animals or what, but all with this kind of bouncy rhythm going on. I mean, I love contrasts like that usually in songs when they work. I don't think it works that well with this particular one where the music doesn't fit the vocal. Again, a contrast that in other songs works great sometimes, where you have the upbeat music with a very morose lyric or terrifying lyric or something, but here I just don't think it works. Thankfully, the album takes an immediate bounce back with the next song, Deliver Us from the Elements. Now, here is where things go back into this almost psychedelic realm that was promised on the first 2 songs. And you know, you're taken right back to that special place, your happy place. And the ending of this, the way it all wraps up with this just swirling orchestration, just whooshing around, and just beautiful ending to that song. So this album does have high points. It has some okay points. Maybe you want to skip some of those on second and third listens. But side 2 is pretty much plays into that same territory, with Human Alchemy being this excellent side 2 opener where, you know, the lyrics are you know, pretty stark, and then the music is sort of this African beat with this sort of warped reggae just buried underneath of it. Just, you really have to dig into the sound of that. And that's the thing about a lot of the tracks on this album. You really have to pay attention. It's the kind of thing you put the headphones on, or you're listening in a space where there's not a lot of distractions or whatever, and just go into it. You know, it's that kind of an album. Great album cover artwork as well. I'm giving this 4 stars. Like I said, high points, meh points. So that's going to equal 4 stars. I'm glad, another XTC album that I'm glad that I discovered. This one is called Mummer. So there are many, many people on the planet that know a lot more about the band Gang of Four than I do. I just really am familiar with their album Entertainment, and then this one that I have called Solid Gold. Now, Entertainment is much more popular than this one. Check that out a few times. It's pretty good. But I never was like bowled over by them. Some people absolutely love this group, and so I was really anxious to hear their album that came out to wrap up the month of August 31st, 1983. And this one is called Hard. So I'm ready for Gang of Four to just blow the doors off on this one. This was their final album for quite a while. I don't know if they had another one, maybe in the 90s or something, but this was considered pretty much the final Gang of Four album. 2 guys have already gone, and so we're kind of on a skeleton crew here a little bit. And but I'm ready. Who knows, man? Let's just push play and see what happens. I push play and I'm like, oh, whoops, I got the wrong. Let me go back and, because I got the wrong album. No, that's Gang of Four, huh? Doesn't sound like Gang of Four. Sounds like a techno dance band from the 80s, and that's exactly what they're doing with this album called Hard. It is not hard. It is certainly not as hard as the first 2 albums, the ones I'm familiar with. Yeah, it starts off, very first thing you hear that made me kind of look at the thing and go, oh, I'm playing the wrong album. I got to check this out and, you know, put the right one on. Is it starts off by, all you hear is this like high vocal, like, is this love? I'm like, okay, that's not getting a 4. Yes, it is. And this is what we're getting. So then I did a little bit of research, and yeah, this isn't a favorite with critics. This is not a favorite with fans. I'm all about bands, you know, and artists changing their sound up, trying different things, going in different directions. You can't just keep making the same album over and over again. Great, totally understand that, perfect. But you got to make it still quality, and this one just sounds kind of phoned in. None of the songs are that memorable, with the exception of maybe a couple that are like a little bit of a cut above, like A Man with a Good Car has a nice edge to it. You know, that's a little better than a lot of what's on here. There's a track called Piece of My Heart. No, it is not Janis Joplin. It's not that. It's her own song. That one has a little more energy than a lot of what's going on here. But most of this sounds like dance, 80s dance B-sides. You know, like the big hits on the other side somewhere, and somebody accidentally flipped the record over, and we're hearing something that was just kind of thrown out there by the band. They didn't have a lot of time to think about it. We need something for a B-side. Let's just toss this off. Okay, has it been running for 4.5 minutes yet? Okay, we can stop the song now. But under them, boom. You know, that's what a lot of this sounds like. It definitely is not going to please people who are way into like the post-punk stuff and the harder stuff and the political lyrics and the stick it to society stuff that was going on in the earlier Gang of Four albums. There'll be none of that. This is happy, feel-good kind of dance music that isn't really distinctive or interesting. Like I said, A Man with a Good Car, you know, all right, it's a little better, and Piece of My Heart, all right, a little more energy going on, a little more going on in that song. But most of this stuff is just completely forgettable. I'm giving this 2 stars, and moving on with my life. And lately, my life has been listening to and reviewing albums from 1983 chronologically, so I'll be getting on with that in the next video. Going into the month of September 1983, I'll talk about albums from Tom Waits, Dokken, Raven, Jimmy Buffett, and a whole lot more, including Black Sabbath. And yeah, you probably know what album it's 1983 Black Sabbath, so that'll be fun. So hopefully you'll join me for that. Thank you for riding along so far on the cruise through 1983 with, you know, the top down and the red Corvette or Trans Am as we're just flying down the 1983 highway chronologically, listening to, rating, and reviewing all of these albums. Once again, no soundtracks, no live albums, no EPs, no country, no jazz, no compilations, but pretty much almost everything else. So yeah, thank you so much. It's quite a journey, is it not? Yes, I totally appreciate you being a part of it, and hopefully you will join me in the next one as well. I'm Robert Fitton, and I will hopefully talk to you then.